be anything defined regarding the definitions of homogeneous or heterogeneous classroom settings. We will do that. It doesn't have to be in any order. This is just for general discussion. I provided you with an outline of what we're going to discuss. Okay.
One approved, please report to the office. One approved.
I'll just begin it then by reading the first question and then you can respond. In your opinion, are there any significant differences in the way homogeneous ability grouping and heterogeneous ability grouping affect classroom instruction?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Having read all the questions, maybe people disagree, jump in. I think we'd be better off starting with number 10, because then if we start where we're coming from, these questions, answering these questions reflects more of our, our answers would be more relevant. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that or not.
Entirely up to you.
I guess we've got to start with where we're at. And I think now, isn't the scheduling more or less homogeneous?
Yes, it is.
And I guess it does make for some real nice classrooms, and it makes for some very interesting classrooms, to put it mildly. And we've always felt, well, why don't we put them all in one classroom so that then we won't have to deal with them for the rest of the day. And that classroom begins to become the real challenge of the cluster. It's interesting, too, with our group this year in Discovery, that challenging group has gone from a cycle of becoming real challenging the first few quarters to now sort of shaping up to finally seeing a light now that's towards the end and becoming not a too bad group of kids. With a little bit of help from maybe whacking them on the head a few times at 2 or 3 F's is something they need to pay heed to. And also removing some of the real bad ones and putting them to another location. But there's others in that group that have sort of continued to go along, that have sort of been middle of the road, that continue to be middle of the road, and have sort of been mezza-mezza throughout the year. It's been interesting to watch it as the years gone along.
Do you think they would have been better in a heterogeneous group?
Not
Do you think they would
necessarily.
not have had problems?
I think we.
Or have had the successes if they had been in a heterogeneous group?
I think that, in going back over that group, that keeping them together, I think, has been advantageous.
That's what-
Because we're dealing with the same problems with a lot of different kids. And it's not only academic problems, but it's also a lot of personal problems, that they bring into the school with them. And by keeping them kind of contained, we've been able to, take time out and be able to deal with those problems that the kids have and develop a better rapport with them and not push them along maybe quite so much academically, but in the early times dealing with the problems and continuing to try to encourage them even though they weren't performing well academically, that eventually, I think we've got to a lot of those kids. I think it's been a very rewarding year with that group because of the turnaround. I think if they were in and spread out, it would have been an advantageous effect on a lot of other kids who could easily turn to following.
You mean it would have been disadvantageous?
Yeah.
Oh, the other cluster's doing well.
Your cluster is also set up in terms of ability groupings.
They're all set up that way.
Yeah, I mean, how do you feel about that? Is that preferable or non-preferable?
Well, I think it has its advantages and disadvantages. It keeps them competitive with each other. It's like almost like a competition. Like who can do better? Oh, I got 100, you got 99. It's like they all compete against each other, which is good. But the only problem that you have, that's an advantage. Disadvantage is not all 20 or 25 kids in the class are at that level. Most of them are, and maybe most of them start out to be, but then you start to find the few that maybe didn't belong in that group, that didn't get tracked correctly. We found a lot that shouldn't be there through things like they should be maybe at Marshall in the bilingual class. We don't have that, but parents chose to overlook that and send them here anyways. And I think that is one problem that I know we've run into a couple of situations that we've had in try to find
Language
some help
barriers,
for them.
you mean?
Excuse me?
Language barriers?
Yes, and that are in that top group that just, they maybe could be, but don't belong
One
there.
that
They need
proves to come
other
to the
help.
office.
So that's one disadvantage. And then, kids that just that aren't good at competition and find a class being competitive, and then they back off because they don't like competition. They may be just the wallflower. They may have the ability, but they feel, how should I say, threatened, intimidated by it. So those are disadvantages. So it has advantages and disadvantages. That's my opinion.
How about with regard to your preparation for different types of classes? Anyone want to comment on? Do they prepare differently? Do they expect different things, or with regard to the different ability groups?
Well, I'll tell you something. I prefer, and it's not in vogue right now, but for me personally, I prefer homogeneous grouping. And that's not to say that I don't want, the lower level, and I know everybody's looking and saying, well, you get all the top kids, and I do, so understand where that's coming from. But even within the groups that I see, particularly my 7th graders, they are supposedly grouped homogeneously. I would say that there are 2 groups that are grouped very homogeneously. One, we thought they were, but they're not. And they really have very top kids and, right, they have real top kids and kids that are struggling and are probably misplaced in some ways. But I know, I'm thinking of one particular group that I had when they walked in the door. I said to myself, these are poster children for heterogeneous grouping. And I looked at them, and there were some kids who were really on top of things, and then there were other kids who really seemed to be out to lunch. But even the kids who were really on top of things were not as on top of things as other groups that I had. And with that group, I have gone at a slightly slower pace. I have, they have done all of the same material. Right now, there may be 2 sections behind, and that's not a lot, within the content area. There may be 2 sections behind the other 2 classes. That particular class has a majority of children whose first language is not English and probably go home and don't hear any English. So I have taken a lot of time to just really explain things out where they would be confused with the English explanations of things. And I have to tell you, they've been like flowers. I mean, that's all I can just, that's how I think of them. They are doing so well. They're a small group. They love the attention that, I have the time to give them. And they are just really responding well. And I think that any one of those students, with maybe a couple of exceptions, had they been placed in one of my other 2 groups, would have gotten lost with the very competitive kids. I wouldn't have had the time to give them the instruction that I've had the time to give them, and I don't think they would have done as well. And I think that they would have felt a lot of stress. I'm thinking of one kid in particular. You know who I'm talking about, Mr. Eyelashes, that was in Carol's office crying. I mean, he was so stressed out. I think if he were in a real competitive group like that, I think he just would have been a mess.
So
Because he was a mess in a slow group for a while. But he's coming along, and he's a wonderful student.
So as far as the students, some of them might feel stressed if they were placed in a classroom with students with a much higher ability than themselves. You think it would put stress on the students?
I think it would have put stress on this kid, definitely.
Some students.
Yeah.
I think this whole issue is kept alive by administrators and college professors. I don't think this is an issue. Heterogeneous does not work. It's not the natural order. 150 years ago, we had the ultimate heterogeneous classroom. We had a one-room schoolhouse. And everybody said, hey, this isn't working. Now, the college professors and the administrators want to reinvent it. Doesn't work. It's not going to work. Harvard University is homogeneous. Charles Street Jail is homogeneous. Fenway Park is full of sports fans. Like attracts like. The Brookline Country Club is full of rich people. That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be if you want efficiency. This is not a debatable issue. You want heterogeneous, you have chaos. You cannot teach in that. That's all I have to say.
Yeah,
I'll see you later.
I have,
It's not an issue for me.
Thank you for your.
I told you he'd be interesting.
No, I appreciate it.
I mean, I really agree with Steve. I was schooled in the homogeneous style. I basically worked in a system for the last almost 30 years in that type of a system. I mean, occasionally we do get a real mixed bag. I found it was very, very difficult to work with.
Mixed grouping.
The real mixed bag. Some of the lower kids, you know, the kids that are struggling, that don't have as much ability, they get frustrated much easier. The really bright kids are not challenged as much as they could. And I think you end up gearing yourself more to the middle and losing both ends. I have...
Brandon, please report to the office of Ms. Missel.
I have some friends that have a relatively bright kid. He's in a homogeneous group. The parents are frustrated because they don't think the kid's being challenged. They tend to use the kid to help the slower kid. Yes.
It's in heterogeneous.
He's in heterogeneous, didn't I say that?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's in a heterogeneously grouped classroom. They tend to use that kid to help some of the slower kids.
Right.
You know, and this is the new thing. You have the bright kids, they learn by helping the other kids.
But they don't.
But they're not challenged. They're not being challenged. You're using them to do somebody else's job.
And the other thing too is lots of times if you say that you really don't, you're not in favor of heterogeneous grouping, some people take that to mean that you don't want to deal with the lower level kids. And I don't think that that's true. You know, I know that there are some people who, I mean, we all have areas of strength and weaknesses, and some people prefer to teach the brighter kids, and other people actually prefer to teach the kids that, you know, take a little longer to learn, and that's fine. But I think that, you know, saying that you prefer homogeneous grouping does not necessarily mean that you don't want to deal with the lower track kids.
No, I'll tell you that, you know,
I think they do better in a homogeneous grouping because you can give them that time, you can give them the attention, and a lot of times those kids come with a lot of baggage, just a lot of baggage, and if you can just gear things differently, then they will do better.
I mean, other than academic issues.
Yeah, they have, yeah.
What would you say about the allegation or thought that the lower level kids sort of get stuck in the lower level, and even though they may overcome some of their weaknesses or whatever through the years of schooling, they end up still trapped, so to speak, in that lower level?
They may be, and not stuck, they may still be in the lower, or maybe the lower class, but I don't think I think personal ability-wise, they may have gained. They may still be in the same class with this group, but I think they would have gained something, you know, improved. So in other words, they may be in that group, but that doesn't mean they're a low-level kid. I mean, they could have improved their skills and their abilities a lot, but you know, at this point in time, they don't all of a sudden just change, you know, to a higher group like that. They track much earlier time. So they could have improved a great deal. They just haven't been, you know, put in the language program or another program yet. You know, maybe until when they get to another school, high school, take a couple grades. But I think they could be improving their skills and gaining, you know, improving their ability, even though they're still in a lower class, so to speak. You know, I think a lot of it is, you know, individuality. You know, how much
readability.
You know, how much the kid improves.
That was one of the other comments I was going to make. What about with regard to subject areas? Are there some subjects that you could put mixed groups together, and others that it just wouldn't be possible?
You know, that's
Like, for
yeah.
example, reading. maybe.
Social, science, reading are all real.
Mhm.
And if they can't read, they're
You
dead.
know, don't you find, I think in our cluster meetings, maybe you guys find the same thing, when we talk about certain kids, well, this kid's failing, or he's not doing something, he's having a hard time comprehending, he can't read, doesn't understand it, and then all of a sudden, well, geez, she's doing great in math, well, she's doing great in math, and we find that thing with the figures, you guys find
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yes.
You find, sure.
That the kid that's very low on the reading side, on the comprehension side, for some reason in math,
It's not
is
so much reading at all.
performing
But
well.
lots of kids who have language deficiencies,
Mhm.
they're not as affected by that in math.
Right,
Because, I mean, unless you're doing word problems,
right.
and then you might find them falling back down. But also, some of those kids do well in French, surprisingly enough, because they are at a level playing field
Right.
with the other kids in
So I
terms
think
of
that answers
English
that question,
background.
don't you?
Yeah.
That yes, to the question just asked, as far as those other areas, but as far as, like you said, the areas that require reading and comprehension, no.
Shouldn't we clear up the fact that, this school does obviously track, but it's not a philosophy that governs what we do.
That's
I mean, it happens, but it's not the driving force to separate one type of child from another.
No.
I mean, what drives us in this school
It's language.
is the fact that we try to group kids based on
Language
math
and math.
ability and their desire to take a foreign language.
Right.
And whatever else happens is a result of that. It's not the fact that we're trying to purposefully isolate one type of kid from another. And
You see in the
this
seventh
is not a particular
They pick-
school of thought that is the be-all and end-all of pre-junior high school. I mean, I take issue with Mr. Graven. There are reasons to have heterogeneous grouping. Some kids, in a very specific manner, may benefit from just the socialization of being with a different type of kid. It may impact their learning ability, it may impact the content, but it may have immeasurable benefits in terms of how they see other kids go about learning. So I don't think that anyone can just write off a school of thought as being totally wrong. I mean, that's quite arbitrary, and I think it's totally out of line. So I think there's kind of a place in different fashions for all types of learners. And you just can't, I know that in cluster meetings, we've talked about how, well, maybe if we take this child and place him with this group because of a certain type of situation, that it may work out for him. And you try to fine-tune things to the best interests of that child. And you can't just say across the board that this works or this doesn't work. That's what we're in the business of, trying to do things, particularly with clustering, to get things and get kids into the best possible circumstance for whatever reason, be it content area, be it socialization, be it emotional. Some kid may need a friend. You know, who knows what would be the driving force behind placing a kid in a certain circumstance. So I don't think that we're specifically of a philosophy that even though we do track, that's the driving force.
Julie,
Yes.
and number 5, I mean, this is a minority school now.
Well, I understand that. This was a more
But if
general.
you took my cluster alone,
But not necessarily, but that
My
question is
question
still
alone-
pertinent though,
yeah, but
Bill.
my cluster alone is almost 70% minority.
Right?
We have no white children.
Well, that's,
If you look at the overall groupings of our groupings, there are no white kids in our cluster.
I
We're
don't know. I would have to
Jesse
think about that.
and Chris,
Without using names, I would have to
those
think
two are the
about
only
that.
two in that class. That class is like 90%.
You're talking about Patty's homeroom?
Yeah,
No, sir.
name 2 more.
Colleen,
Oh, that's
Crystal, Jesse.
But wouldn't this type of question be specific to the community? I mean,
Exactly,
they can do tracking in Danvers and have no minorities.
Right.
And,
Still have
But
low
this
you know,
is
numbers.
still-
we're a community that just happens to have
Where
a growing number of minorities.
And I mean,
So-
if you take our cluster, I think if you just say minority and the white, you know, if you break it down that way, we're pretty well spread out.
Right.
But if you break down specific ethnic groups, then it's a disparity. I mean, we have an
Disparity among-
overabundance of Asian kids
That's
in the upper level groups.
Top groups.
Right. In the literature, a lot of the upper level groups include white and Asian, primarily the population of white and Asian. In the lower level groups, this is just the overall statistics. There is a predominance of Hispanic, Black. That's just the way the
We don't have that many blacks.
fall. No, not in our school or even in our cluster, but that's just the way the numbers work out. So in our highest level groups, we do have a high number of minority Asian or the population.
enough minority to go to school.
Right.
Yeah, but
And-
they're, you know, you're talking in terms of the general world, you know, the general population of the country. That's what you're looking at.
Say just as a last question though, say for example, based on a comment that we've made, the administrators or whoever just decided that you're just going to get a heterogeneous class, period. All your classes are going to be heterogeneous. What kinds of things would you need or have to do to make that work?
It's unteachable, I already have
I do too. I agree. Your prep time, I agree with Dick, we kind of just go.
The prep time increases, would you say?
Well, it does, but I don't think you're really challenging.
Well, I
the
think
more
one of the things that you
capable
need to look at, if administration made this, kind of decision, there are techniques out there that are supposedly geared towards teaching the homogeneous classroom.
Heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous classroom, sorry about that. And it would take some serious in-service time,
Well, you know what? though?
to work towards helping us improve our skills to deal with it.
But you know what else, though, baby? In an elementary school, in an elementary classroom within a self-contained classroom, those kids supposedly are heterogeneously grouped. From what I understand, talking to my friends who teach in elementary school and different schools throughout the city, those classrooms are heterogeneously grouped classrooms. And those teachers are teaching a variety of subjects during the day. God bless them. But within that heterogeneously grouped classroom, you find several reading groups.
Reading level 1, 2,
So you group the children in reading into homogeneous reading groups. Now, it is entirely possible for a red bird to become a bluebird. And the fact of the matter is that everybody knows which birds are the smarter birds, in terms of reading. Within that heterogeneously grouped classroom, there are often 2 math groups. And those kids are socializing with each other all day, they are friends with each other all day, and they are going, and they just, so this group is working on a paper and the teacher is working with this other small group of kids. And then when they finish, she takes the other group of kids and brings them along at their pace. I think that when they get into the social studies and the science aspect, I think that they probably come together more as a complete heterogeneous group. But certainly in the reading and possibly in the math, those kids are broken down into homogeneous groups. But what happens when we come here is we are not a self-contained classroom. And so you're going to see, not every kid in the kindergarten may be ready for sounds. So the teacher will take those kids that are, and sit and work with sounds on them, and then work with other kids about, with what they're doing to develop. So, I think that's part of the reason that we're not heterogeneously grouped. That we are doing specific content areas at different times, and maybe it works out. I think it works out for the best with the kids. I could be wrong, and I know that there are people who disagree with me in the homogeneous grouping. I think that there is certainly a place for heterogeneous grouping. I agree with you in terms of the socialization and sometimes just meeting a friend and the example set. I agree with you in all of that. If you're talking about content area, the fact of the matter is that within a heterogeneous class, in my opinion, that you're going to have the top kids not being challenged, the bottom kids lost, and the class that I had that was more heterogeneous than homogeneous, although we didn't think it was going to be that way. I know that I had kids who were sitting there and were getting something like this, and then they're tuning out while I'm teaching, to the other kids who are getting it and doing, and then there's another crew there that are just lost in space, and I know they're lost in space, and I try to get them to come back, but they don't come back, and I have used kids to help other kids, and I think that all of those kids would be better served regrouped. But we're doing what we're doing, and we're having some successes, and some kids that are not so successful, maybe should have been placed there to begin with, but we just always do the best we can with what we have in front of us.
I look at inclusion as certainly a big step towards heterogeneous grouping.
Right.
Which we don't have inclusion.
So I'm interested what you've got to say, Mac, about
You're
inclusion
talking
in the
about,
cluster.
you're talking about, here, you have it pretty easy, because a lot of the special ed kids are with me, Mrs. Foggy, Mrs. Murphy,
Right,
Mrs. Walker. You go to other systems, and these children are sitting in front of you.
right.
You go to elementary school, I bet you Mr. Walden's wife will tell you that her class or her time is spent, she may have 25 kids or 30 kids in that classroom, but she probably has 2 or 3 really special needs kids in there that really demand a lot of her time and attention. And anybody you know that works in elementary school works their tails off, and it's not easy. And anybody in junior high school with special needs kids in their classrooms are going to have to do the same thing. I think we're all looking at it like, what's easiest for us, to prepare one lesson for one group is nice.
I don't know if that's true.
But to accommodate everybody and all the needs of all the kids.
Right.
I tell people, I say, you're a teacher in Lynn, doesn't mean you're a teacher of just the nice kids in Lynn.
Right.
You're a teacher of the kids from the circle, and the kids from the projects, the
No,
kids
but
from everywhere.
where I take a little bit of issue with that is that within the elementary classroom, the teacher has 6 hours or whatever, the whole day span is with those kids in that class. And so if she doesn't get to all the reading groups in the morning, she can get to some of them in the afternoon. But we're looking at a block of time. And so you're sort of limited in that. My thing is,
System, this building is one of the few buildings. I've been taking classes at Salem, and I tell them what kind of classroom I have, and they look at me like, what? You still doing that? And I was like, yeah, why? And I was like, oh, I got this girl in a wheelchair that can't, can't go to the bathroom, she has to be fed, she got to do this, I got another kid who needs a machine to talk, and you say, wow, they're in these classrooms.
So we're in a different circumstance because of the nature of our community where we have to try to provide for the good learners.
we have to try to
If we
provide
don't
for everyone.
provide for the good learners, then we're going to lose, in a very practical sense,
Right.
more and more people to the Masconomet's,
That's
to
exactly.
Danvers. We're going to lose them out of the community. It's
And
a
one
fact
thing
of
that's
life.
kept the kids in this school, we have a lot of very, what you're referring to as good learners. We have a lot of good learners in this school. And one of the things that has kept those families sending those children to this school is because they have had the ability to be challenged.
So the perception is that if we do, like Topsfield may be able to get away with this because people are moving to Topsfield. People aren't moving to Lynn for their education. So it's our mission to try and keep the solid students within our system. So if the perception is of one that we're going to integrate every type of student into that classroom, then we may very well be shooting ourselves very seriously in the foot to accomplish something that may work very well in a community that's not threatened with the loss of this type of student, like we may very well be. So it may be easy for Masconomet to pull this off because people aren't going to say, well, I'm taking my kid out because he's not challenged in that classroom.
It's easy too.
But it can happen here in Lynn very, very easily.
These other communities do provide full-time aides in the classroom and
Exactly.
a lot of support.
And it
It costs a
it's
lot of money to do that.
as another example, when I did the International Week down in the Challenger Cluster, I went into Billy's social studies class and I think it was Steve's English class, and they were the 2 groups of kids who were not French students, they were not College Course students, and gave them a French lesson. And in Billy's class, Patty brought her kids in, and we had a ball in there. I mean, I did stuff that was just geared for that class. We had a wonderful time in there. I mean, Patty's kids still pass me in the hall yelling bonjour, which I'm sure you're sick of hearing. They want to come into French class. Now, I'm going to tell you, I haven't talked to Suzanne yet, but they're all invited in on June 3rd. I'll tell you what periods, so they can see a presentation that the other kids are doing. Now, if those kids wanted to take French, okay, I could, and would love it, go into that classroom, however the schedule was set up, and there are things that they could do in French. Absolutely, things they could do. They did great today. I was in your room. They were a lot of fun. The kids were very good and very participatory. But we can't take those kids. I mean, let's be real honest. We're talking about 0.4 kids here. We can't take those kids and put them into my 7th grade French class and expect them to understand possessive adjectives and why they're masculine, feminine, singular, and plural, and how they have to agree with the noun that follows them, and so forth. They're not going to do that. And so putting those kids in that class is an injustice to those kids. But that's not to say that there aren't some things that they, can't do, or there are things that they can do. And on that level, I mean, that's a very extreme example, I know. But what would it serve? I mean, I can picture it now. Trying to get them to, do this. They couldn't.
No, but one of the things that Jerry said earlier was,
But they can come in and observe something going on in the class. They can
and it
sing
may have made
songs.
them feel like smart for once.
Exactly.
Like, wow, I'm in this class with all these smart kids.
Exactly.
Positive things. And like you said, they're not going to be able to read a poem, by some French author, but so you accommodate, you modify,
But
if
then
the
what
kid is in your
happens?
room.
But her class she's teaching, who take second group, they're going at one speed real fast.
Right.
And poor little girl that sits in my homeroom, which is upstairs, she'd be totally gone out in cloud nine.
Yeah, she would. She'd be out in
she
the
would,
But you wouldn't have the same expectations for her.
But
And so
she'd
then
be
you
sitting
get into
there-
a weighted grade thing.
Right.
Then you get into a whole thing of weighted grades, which has its pros and its cons.
I mean,
And I agree with you on that.
so you look at the positive thing is maybe
See-
they come out learning a few words and
Yeah.
how to make, French fry, how to make some kind of French food or something, and, just something as simple as that.
I agree with you on that one level, but there is a real part of me, the part of me that's saying that my job here, or the better part of my job here is to educate these kids and to prepare them to go on and so forth. And you sort of like, I don't even know how to put it. How am I going to do all these kids at once is what I'm thinking. Am I going to take time away from the kids that I know are going to go on and do it? And, I would love to sit down with these kids. I mean, I didn't try to do it with the 6th grade if they were stuck for somebody. But it's a whole different program. And my point is that they would not benefit from the program that is in my curriculum now. And to revamp the program so that it would benefit them is going to be of no benefit to the other 25 kids sitting in my room.
So what if we altered the curriculum and just had a generic
And then you're not benefiting
math,
the
social
25 kids.
science,
And
English,
who's gonna run the
reading,
country afterwards?
and let them,
And they're all going to go, then they're all going to go to Masco. Then they're all going to go to
You'll have the
Masco.
biggest flight out of Pine Hill.
That's what you get.
And Ward 1 you never see.
The
but
issue
then
that,
you could have heterogeneous grouping.
the issue that
Then you destroy the jobs in the
Mac
city.
brought up was that the exposure to the curriculum. And that's one of the
There is no
topics.
exposure.
No, I mean, that's one of the
I've had
topics
classes
that
like that.
they
You're talking to a person who's had these kids over the years, and I've had them all in my room.
Yeah, you have. That's
I've
what
taught
I'm
all these children, I've put up with many weird scenes in my room.
I remember.
And I know for a fact, I went through one scene one year where I asked and begged for an aide to come to my class because I had 30 children in front of me. And instead of giving me an aide to help me, they took half the class away from me. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted someone there, that period, so I could get past row 1. I could not get directions done past row 1 because the hands would go back up. So they took half the class. And that still left me with half a class of half sped kids.
But when we're talking, if you want to go around to SPED, it's SPED and then there's
I don't
SPED.
know. I have all of them.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
SPED kids come in different
Oh,
levels
yeah,
and different
that's
abilities
the
too.
whole-
I mean, there's a spectrum of kids in SPED that's as diverse as in regular ed, let's be honest.
If anyone else has anything, I don't want to hold anyone up. Yeah, sure, please. If you did, that'd be great. But thank you, unless anyone else has anything else to say, I really appreciate, thank you very much. Did you get your snacks? You didn't have a snack?
No,
Oh,
Oh,
oh my God. Can't even come on.